All right, ladies and gentlemen, I love doing these segments because we could all use advice when it comes to money. And a man who's here to set us straight on the myths that perpetuate over and over and over again and that are drummed into our head about what's good for the economy. Political economy editor of Forbes, editor of RealClearMarkets.com, plus a senior economic advisor to Toreador Research and trading author. Popular Economics is the name of the book. There it is. It's on your screen. Why the Rolling Stones, Downtown Abbey, and LeBron James can teach you about economics. Good to see you.
Hey, great to.
All right. So what could LeBron James teach me about economics, or teach any of us about economics?
Well, the idea behind the book was that economic growth is so simple, and everyone knows it because they know the world around them. And so if you want to understand free trade, LeBron James is a very good example of it. He is the best basketball player in the world. That's how he can create the most wealth for himself. But it is said by football players that he could also be a tight end in the NFL. Yeah. And so I make the argument, if he did so, that would be a disaster because it would be at the expense of him being the best basketball player in the world, and it would actually reduce his income for doing both. Well, free trade's no different. It's entirely possible that you're the best chef and the best tailor and the best builder in the world, but if you were to do all three of those things, it would be at the expense of doing what you're best at, which is being the host of a TV show. And so we all, as individuals, trade freely. We let others do things that they're good at, and we concentrate on what we're best at because that allows us to command the most in the economy.
That's very true and very interesting. You also talk about a lot in the book why us giving our money to the government is not good for the economy. It's the worst thing we could do for the economy.
It's a disaster for the economy, and it's particularly disastrous when the rich hand their money over to the government rather than holding on to it. And the reason for this is basic. When Paris Hilton gets $100,000 to DJ a show in Las Vegas, she puts that money into the bank. In short, her wealth is immediately redistributed to those who are not Paris Hilton, and that's why we want the rich to hold on to their wealth. They put it in the bank, it's lent to someone who needs a car loan or needs a college tuition or who needs a small business loan. If they invest it in the stock market, they're providing capital to businesses. It's when the other option is to hand it over to the government. We know they're gonna consume it. At least when the rich hold on to it, they redistribute it to us.
But what choice do we have?
That's the problem. And so the idea should be, and this is what this is in many ways the first 10 chapters of the book about, we have got, taxes are a price, and when government is taxing us, it is robbing us of future ESPNs, future Intels, Googles, all these great companies. That's what we're missing out on when government is taking too much of our money.
Yet we're told and we're taught from as soon as we could be taught that, you know, taxes are for the greater good, and taxes go to do this for people and that for people, provide services for people. And to some extent, that is true. Believe me, I believe with you that we're overtaxed and there's waste galore, and we could, you know, have a flat tax or whatever and all live happily ever after. But so how do we change the public's perception of what taxes are all about?
Well, that's part of the reason that I wrote this book, is I showed them what happens when we overtax. And so, for instance, I used the Rolling Stones. In the 1970s, the top tax rate in England was 83%. Well, as Keith Richards pointed out, that was the equivalent of being told to leave the country. Right. Guess what? That's what they did.
British invasion.
They made Exile on Main Street in France one of their best albums ever. Now, the Stones were able to move. They were rich. They could escape the tax. But what about all the sound engineers, all the caterers, all the people who work on the creation of album? They didn't have the means to go with the Stones. So it's the poor and the middle class who pay for the high income tax rates levied on the rich. Let's look at the Getty oil fortune. In the 1950s, he was the richest American in the world. He left behind a fortune worth billions of dollars. Thank goodness he was able to leave that to his heirs, because guess what they did? While the government would have consumed it on any number of things, among other things, the Gettys invested $10 million in what was then a fledgling network. We now know it as ESPN, the most valuable sports property in the world. This is what happens when government is not able to consume the wealth we create. Invariably, they've got to put the money somewhere. It's going to find these exciting companies of the future.
No, that's a very good point. And of course, you know, individuals such as was it Tiger Woods and no, maybe Phil Mickelson? You know, yeah, Woods and I think Mickelson both left California to go to Florida because of the tax rate. You know, so that happens. It's an education, and it's something that I think it's presented. You know, people a book on economics and their eyes, you know, glaze over. But this is not that kind of book, and explains it to you folks out there in terms and examples and ways that you could understand and you'd be interested in. And it really does explain and drum home the message that he's trying to drum home in very clear ways. John Tamny, the book Popular Economics. I hope we get leadership that really listens to you. I really do.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
All the answers. Everyone understands how economies grow. We
Yep.
could be much more prosperous. It's all in there through stories, you know.
Yep, absolutely. All right, folks. So we are coming back again. Popular Economics. Don't go away.